Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Prath from the Content and Partnerships team here at Tokyo Hideout, also known as TYHO. I will be your facilitator for today's webinar, and joining us today is one of our TYHO therapists, Alex, who will be leading this session. For those new to TYHO, here's a quick introduction before we get started. We're an end-to-end therapy platform offering high-quality mental health support. This includes online audio and video sessions globally, as well as in-person sessions in Singapore. Now, moving on to today's topic, self-esteem and confidence in the workplace. Research shows that nearly 85% of people globally have low self-esteem at some point in their lives. And in the workplace, I guess it shows up as self-doubt, hesitation to share ideas, or just generally holding back from embracing opportunities. On the flip side, research also shows that employees with healthy and uh, positive self-esteem report greater job satisfaction and overall happiness at work. And that's why we chose today's topic, because self-esteem and confidence are directly tied to how we experience work, how supported we feel, and ultimately how happy we are in our careers. Before we dive in, I would like to quickly share about today's flow. Alex will lead us through the webinar on today's topic, and after that, we'll open up the space for questions. You can type in your questions in the chat at any time. Please feel free to engage, share your experiences. All types of sharings are welcome, and we'll try to address as many questions as possible at the end. If you'd prefer to stay anonymous or don't want your name to be read out, we recommend changing your name on Zoom, or you can send your questions directly to me or my colleague Manasa via the Zoom chat. At the end of the Q&A segment, we'll also be sharing a couple of QR codes, one for the feedback form, the next AMA, and also Alex's profile, so you can book sessions with her. So please stay tuned until the very end. Now, I'd love to introduce our speaker for today, Alex. Alex is a therapist at TYHO who works with individuals, couples, families, and teams. She has a master's in counseling and brings a strong understanding of cultural nuances, having lived in countries all over the world. Alex supports clients with many issues like stress, anxiety, problems in relationships, workplace stress, and also, of course, self-esteem issues. We're excited to have her with us today to talk about self-esteem and confidence at work. Thank you so much for being here, Alex. With that, I will hand over the stage to you.
Thank you so much, Prath, and a very, very warm welcome to all of you joining me. I'm very excited to be here to share something, a topic that's very, very dear to my heart, something that I feel I hope will be very helpful to you, because it is something that I think is one of the biggest and best investments you can really give to yourself, right? To be able to have a self-esteem where you know and you're confident about the things that you're able to achieve. And as we talk today, you'll also figure out that that also means being comfortable and confident with things that you're not that good at, and that things that you never will be that great at because it's just not your natural strength. Okay, so today we're going to talk lots and lots about how self-esteem works. But before that, I'm actually really, really want to make sure that your chats are up and running because I do like to try and interact a lot with you throughout the session. I want to make sure that the session's engaging for you, that you are giving me your feedback at all times of the session so that I can make this talk really speak to you and really feel applicable to the type of situations that you're going through personally. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a second to let everybody say a hello. Hi, thanks for starting us off. I can see anyone giving us a hi. Can everybody else who's with us, yeah, just give a hi, a hello, any greeting you want to give. Enjoy the sun, or oh, it's hot, or hope you stay in the shade. Really nice to see all the hellos coming in right now. This is super, super helpful. So I know everyone's chat is actually working, and you can also get familiar with where your chat is, being able to see all the comments and things that are there. Okay. Um, I also want to make sure that I have a little bit of an idea of who's joining us today. So if you feel comfortable, please could you also share with us what it is that you do with a lot of your time in the day. So whether you're a student or whether you're working, if you do want to share with us what you work as or the role that you play, some of the struggles you face, please feel free to share that. Okay. Um, Wonderful. Nice to see all those coming in. So here's what we're going to be covering today. Okay. So the first thing that we're going to be talking about, let me see, where is this moving? Is the just the definition of a healthy self-esteem. Okay, so we want to all be talking about the same thing today, right? And there's lots of probably different ways to see it. Next, we'll talk about the benefits to a healthy self-esteem. So if I do have it, then what good is it going to bring me anyway, right? And of course, lastly, how can you develop a healthy self-esteem? Okay. Um, so at the end, I'll share lots of thoughts about it, but I also want to hear yours because I'm sure some of you have some really good ideas about how to work on your self-esteem as well. Okay. Um, Here's the first bit. So here's what I want to start with. How would you define self-esteem for yourself, right? So there's no wrong answers here. Just whatever you think. What words come to mind? What phrases, what definitions when you think about self-esteem? What comes to your mind? I'd really love to see what some of you are thinking so far. Nice. So being comfortable with yourself. Any other thoughts? Yeah, thinking positively about oneself, respecting yourself, and then therefore it helps you respect others. Yeah, really nice thoughts. How about the rest of you? Any other thoughts on what a healthy self-esteem would look like? Yeah, having confidence, feeling in control. Nice. Okay, so these are some really great ideas. A lot of these are what I would like you to start thinking about. So there are many definitions of self-esteem. Many of them involve confidence, many of them involve feeling good in yourself. I want to share with you a two-facet way of looking at self-esteem today. Okay? And this two-facet way of viewing things involves looking at two portions, right? One is the competence and one is the worthiness, right? So when we're talking about competence, what I want you to think about is having those skills and the abilities that you need to succeed, right? Because let's just say you have all these competencies. So I can make a really good presentation at work, right? Which is one of the competencies my work requires me to do. Or I can actually problem solve really, really well. And I'm good at doing that. It's part of my job. But when I assess myself, I don't think I'm worthy of it. I don't think I'm able. Then what starts to happen, right? So the other portion of self-esteem that we want to start thinking about is worthiness, right? So some of you mentioned that earlier when I asked you what you thought self-esteem was, right? It's do you see oneself as valuable? Do you feel good in yourself? So other people might be like, oh yeah, she's great. Like, oh no, or he has so many qualities, so many expertise, so much experience. But if you don't see yourself as that, then how does that start to look and feel for you? Right? So let's explore that a little bit, right? What happens if you have really high worthiness? So I feel really good in myself. I feel like I have all the skills in the world. I feel like I'm one of the best employees this company has ever had, right? But in terms of skill set, in terms of ability, not quite there, right? What happens then? Have you met somebody like that at your workplace? Tell me on the chat, right? Like, do you know this sort of character who, or maybe it could be you yourself, right? It's like you you think that you're on this level, your competence is quite, you feel like your competence is quite high, but people keep saying to you, or you keep getting feedback that, oh no, actually you need to improve this. This isn't that great. That's not this good. That's not that good, right? Um, so that's one version of an unhealthy self-esteem that we don't want to be seeing, where the worthiness is high, but the competence doesn't match, right? That's going to be an issue, right? And you can see the other way around, which is usually the one which is a little bit more visible to ourselves. Because you can imagine in the first instance, you might not even know that that's you. You might, that those type of people don't use, they may not know that that their competence isn't as highly rated as they think. Exactly. They come across a bit narcissistic, a little bit full of themselves, a little bit know-it-all, but other people don't really agree that much, right? If you're knowledgeable and you have a lot of capability and other people agree, then you're more likely to have that kind of situation where your competence is as high as your worthiness, right? So then now let's look at the opposite, right? So what happens if we have high competence but low worthiness, right? Which I'm sure at some point all of us have felt, right? Everyone else is saying, yeah, but you're doing just fine. Like you've just started, like, you're picking stuff up as quickly as you can, and you think, oh no, I'm not, I'm so slow. Why is everybody else getting it and I'm not getting it? And your competence, your ability to do things is there, but your belief that you're doing it is not there at all. How many of you have experienced that feeling before? Yeah. Um, so when you see that this is you, that other people keep saying your competence is there, or maybe even tests or projects, you're able to do them, but you don't see those achievements as anything worthy of a shout out, right? But other people are saying, wow, it's so amazing you did that project. Oh, I can't believe you aced that. And you're like, doesn't feel that great to me still. Okay. Um, this is when we also have a mismatch, right? And also not what we're looking for when we're looking for this healthy self-esteem. We want to aim for worthiness that matches the competence as much as we can, right? So in the first case, you want to check yourself to see whether you need to improve your competence. But I think for most of us, we're probably thinking or talking about the other way around, where the competence is there, but the worthiness is low. How do we bring that worthiness up, right? So, next thing I want to ask you about, right? So, if we do have healthy esteem, right? It's a healthy self-esteem, right? What do you think the benefits of that would be? So if I have this competence level and I feel competent in myself, I feel good, I feel I can respect myself, I like myself, I'm good in what I contribute, then what benefits do you think that would bring? So I'll give you a second to reply on the chat now. What kind of benefits do you think you'd have if you have that nice, healthy self-esteem? Yeah, so you can perform and you feel less tired, less taxed, right? Yes, you don't doubt your performance so much, you trust it more, you're calmer. Yeah, you can ask for certain boundaries to be met, whereas when you don't feel worthy, you kind of keep quiet about a lot of things that you think you need because you feel like you don't deserve to ask for them, right? Yeah, happy with yourself, like happy within yourself, at peace somehow inside, right? Um, you feel as though you're confident, and when you do things, it feels there's like some sort of flow, right? You don't feel so stressed. Really, really great. Thank you so much, everyone, for contributing on the chat. Like, I agree with so many of the things you're saying, and these are a lot of the things that are actually going to come out now as we go through the different benefits of self-esteem. Okay, so keep these coming. Like, I'm really interested to see what other things you hope that you would get from a healthy self-esteem. Okay, so firstly, people with healthy self-esteem tend to be far less critical of themselves and of others in because you're less critical of yourself, right? So in return to that, to feeling less critical about yourself, you tend to judge others less as well. Some of the critique that we give ourselves, right? Why are you not quicker? Why are you not able to do it first time round? Why are you not performing like him or her, right? Ask yourself this question. Are you being really critical about yourself in a day? Like, let's just say today. Are there some things you've said to yourself that are highly critical, right? And then the other thing is we start to assume that if I'm thinking these things about myself, you assume that other people are thinking those things about you, which could be so far from the truth, right? How many of you, when you think through your day, you have felt critical of yourself about something? Now, critical, different from being realistic, right? So I assess that yes, I wasn't able to give the information to that person that I needed to give. That's one thing, right? Critical means why are you not able to do that when everyone else can? You should be able to. It's not that difficult. You should be better at your job than you are. That's critical, right? So assessing what's happening realistic, being down on yourself is another thing. Okay, that's what we want to look out for to try if when we have healthy self-esteem, you won't hear as much of that within yourself. Okay. Um, Next benefit to healthy self-esteem, right? Just like we had one of our participants share earlier, it's just less stressful. Because I have the capacity to deal with the stresses that I face instead of just constantly having to work with this critique that I have in my head, right? So you actually have the capability to spend time dealing with your stress. Next one, right? Less likely to feel worthlessness, guilt, and shame, right? Those are feelings that are really difficult to feel daily, right? So when we have more self-esteem, this is less likely to be felt. Health, right? So in terms of your lifestyle, your eating, your exercising, tell me this on the chat, right? When you're not feeling great in yourself, how does your eating and exercise change? Have you noticed anything? Have you noticed any trends? So when you're not feeling great in yourself, you're not feeling confident, what happens? Yes, exactly. So, quite a few people saying, right? And it's funny because we usually have the two extremes actually. It's either eating a lot or not eating at all, right? So, some people's stress response is when you're feeling lousy about yourself, you actually stop eating as much because your body goes into that fight or flight, right? But a lot of us have actually gone the other way, which is when we eat, we get a certain release in our brain chemicals, and that release feels comforting to us, and we start getting addicted to that release. And that dopamine release helps us feel calmer, more relaxed, right? So then we start reaching for that food to make that comfort food to make us feel better when we're not feeling great, right? So with healthy self-esteem, we do end up seeing ourselves want to eat better and want to exercise more. Okay. Uh, Next thing, right? Being able to be assertive about things that you want, right? So sometimes this can go in a cycle as well. So what you find is when we feel small or underconfident in ourselves. We don't dare to say the things that we need or we want. But then when we don't say the things we need and we want, we feel lousy that why can't I communicate what I want? Right? And then you feel worse in yourself. So the cycle continues and continues. The more we don't feel good, the more we don't speak up. The more we don't speak up, the worse we feel, right? So we want to try and make the spiral go the other way, upwards. The more I try and speak up, the better I feel about myself. The better I feel, the more I dare to say what I need and want, right? We'll talk a little bit about that in a second. Okay. So next benefit, right? You're able to develop these healthy, honest relationships because relationships require you to be honest and open about things that you want and you need, right? Can anybody think of a relationship and how it went when you stopped? And this can be relationship with a loved one, with a family member, with somebody at the workplace, a colleague, right? Can you think how it went when you stopped saying how you really felt? Right? You had this problem with this colleague, you didn't feel respected by the way they spoke to you, or you felt as though you needed more information from them, but they were just not giving you what you needed. And instead of saying that to them, you just held it in, right? How did that relationship go? My guess is that it slowly starts to break down, right? They don't know what you're thinking, what you're feeling, but they can sense that something's not quite right. And then you feel really distant, right? And you feel as though there's this underlying undercurrent of displeasure between the two of you. And that leads more to the distancing. And then it's even harder to communicate. The relationships just tend not to go great, right? When that starts happening. And then the more you don't say, the harder it is to say anything, right? When the silence has become too common, right? Yeah, yeah, I think it sounds like a lot of you on the call have also experienced this because I can see all of you responding. You've experienced how it goes or can go, right? Um, so another benefit, you feel more confident in your decision making, right? To make decisions for yourself, you have to believe in your ability to make good decisions, right? And when you feel good in yourself, you feel confident to do it. And when you don't feel good in yourself, you just hesitate and you're scared of making those decisions, right? Last one, we're much better able to deal with disappointment and tough stuff when we have that high self-esteem because we know we're going to figure it out one way or another. We trust ourselves that we will figure it out. Even if I don't know how on earth I'm going to figure it out, I trust myself that I will somehow, by hook or by crook, figure it out. Okay? So you can look forward to all these things if we're able to try and develop that healthy self-esteem, which is, of course, our next portion of today. Okay. So what do you think? Can some of you share with me just off the top of your head, right? What are some things you've tried to do to help your self-esteem? Anything you can think of that you felt was helpful to you, that you heard others doing, and then you tried, and then it worked well for you? Things that really like shifted that helped you feel more confident at work, that helped you feel more sure about yourself? Nice. A lot of self-reflection, so that awareness of yourself, knowing which parts of it are my competence that needs to go up, which parts of it am I being accurate about how I assess myself, asking friends and loved ones about positive traits. Oh, I really like that, right? Like, because your friends and your loved ones see you accurately, whereas you're not seeing yourself accurately oftentimes, right? Um, and writing down things that you've done well, right? Being specific about the things that you've done well. Really, really nice. Um, Sometimes we try and tell ourselves, it's okay, no, you're a good employee. But that's so global. Like, what is even a good employee, right? Be more specific. I am able to give really good feedback to my clients when they need it. That's specific and it's true. You can't argue with that, right? Or maybe you could, so make it even more specific. When this client asked for this information, I gave it to them in a timely manner and they told me that they appreciated that feedback. Right? So when you're that specific about it, it's so much harder to argue it against yourself because that is factual, right? Whereas when you say, I'm a good employee, well, there's a lot of ways to argue that against myself, right? So try and be really, really specific. Um, Other things that people said, yeah, affirming myself, telling myself the specific things that I am doing well, that are good. Good. Really, really nice things to hear that you've thought of and that have been helpful for you. Okay. Reaching out despite not really wanting to. Uh, that's really good too. And that's one of the ones I'm going to talk through in the slides a little bit. Okay. So first one, this is something that so many of us with that are struggling with our self-esteem too. We keep comparing ourselves to others, right? We look at our colleagues, like, oh, why do they do this thing so fast? How come they can speak up so easily? How come they can think on the spot so fast, right? Why is it that they don't seem to have any problems with the boss when I do, right? The thing is, when we compare ourselves to others, we are often not comparing their full self to my full self. You're comparing this time when you had this struggle to this other time when they seemingly did it so well, right? But you don't know the struggle it took for them to get to where they are. They could have been working on this thing for ages and ages and ages to be able to respond as well as they did in that moment. Whereas you've just started working on it, maybe, right? The other thing is maybe they are naturally so good at this particular thing, right? And you know that it's their first time doing it, but somehow it's so easy, although it's your 10th time doing it, right? But that's just one little portion of who they are. There's another thing I guarantee you that comes really naturally to you that they would struggle even on the 10th time to do it as well as you can because all human beings are built differently. We all have strengths and weaknesses, stuff that I'm naturally going to be great at because it's just who I am, and stuff that I'm naturally just never going to be that good at. Right? And we want to be able to accept that about ourselves and about others and not just look at that one thing and compare yourself there. Every time you see something that someone's good at, and you can trust my opinion a little bit more than your average person, only because I get to see thousands and thousands of people behind the scenes telling me their secrets about how difficult things really are for them. And then on the outside, we try to put on this a little bit of a mask to protect ourselves, to show that, yeah, everything's okay, I'm fine. But behind the scenes, everybody's working on something, struggling with a bit here and there. Okay? So try not to compare yourselves to others. You don't know how much they're struggling behind the scenes. You don't know how long they've been working at something. You got to remember all the other stuff that's tough for them. Okay? If we're realistic, right? And by the way, a nice thing to do sometimes is instead of wondering or guessing, ask them, right? Ask them, like, have you always been that good at this? Is this something that's always come naturally to you? And then you'll find out the real story, and that will probably help you build that context and understanding for the actual situation. Okay? Next, change your inner voice. Okay. So this is something that is so important because the voice that happens in here is the one you hear the most often. It's the most consistent, it's the loudest, right? And so we really want to track that and understand what that voice is sounding like. If your voice is super encouraging, don't worry, you got this. You might not be there yet, but you will get there. That's the type of voice you want. But if that voice is consistently being like, what is this nonsense? This is not good enough. You should be ashamed of yourself. That voice is going to become your reality, right? And it isn't being that realistic. It's just seeing things from one point of view, right? So we want to shift that voice to a warmer, softer, more encouraging voice, right? That says, it's okay if you don't know what you're doing right now. We can figure that out. We can ask people. We can try it out. We can not do it right the first time, but do it right the next time, right? Um, and I want you to try your best to develop that voice. Think of that person in your life who is that warm and loving and encouraging. And if you don't have that voice yet, that person yet, then I encourage you to try therapy, because that is exactly what therapy is designed for, is to have that person by your side to cheer you on, to say you got this, you'll figure it out. Not to say you have all the answers, but that you will find the answers you need. Okay? So changing and finding that inner voice that's warm and encouraging is super, super important. Okay? Next, how else can you develop that healthy self-esteem, right? You need to be able to take difficult, hard things and squeeze the best that you can from it. Okay. I know there's a lot of mean and cruel people out there, right? And you need to determine whether that person who's saying these critiques to you is a mean and harmful person, or if they're simply just giving you feedback in a really straight and narrow way, right? If it is the first, so they are purposely not very nice people, being really mean, constantly getting at you, you may want to try and speak up for yourself, right? For example, they're saying, they have this mean way of saying things like, why are you going on and on? I don't even know what you're talking about, right? They speak to you in this rude way. You have opportunity to say, hey, is it possible that you can just tell me what it is that you'd like to see from me instead of spending the time focusing on what you don't like that I'm doing, right? By saying this, it helps professionally and respectfully put them into the direction of positive affirmation, what you do want, not what you don't want, right? And it stops them in their tracks a little bit because they have to think, oh, if you're asking me to do this, I have to change the way I'm doing things from a negative way to a positive way. So this is a really good way to work with somebody like that, right? Now, if you try this and you can't get them to change, you need to do what I call taking the kernel of truth, right? In most things that people say, there's an element of truth to it, right? Like for example, when that person was saying that to you, I don't get what you're saying, why are you going on and on? If you take the kernel of truth without him changing what he says, he's probably trying to say, could you be a little bit more straightforward with your point? Could you be a little bit clearer about the message you're trying to get across to me? Right? If somebody's saying to you, let's just say they're quite mean and critical, they're saying, uh, look, this presentation is so far from the detail that we need it to be. This is a pathetic version of what we need, right? If you take the kernel of truth, it's we need a little bit more detail to back up this idea that you're trying to present, right? So if you're good at it, you can find that kernel of truth. And then take that kernel of truth and leave the not so nice packaging it was in, right? And then you get to feel like I win because from your poor interaction in me, I get to take a good thing from it and use it to better myself and feel better in myself. Okay? The last thing is we need to start practicing speaking up, right? Like we spoke about just now earlier in the presentation, that when we don't say what we think and feel, we start to feel lousier in ourselves because we're not able to communicate, and that creates that cycle, right? So sometimes there's a discussion going on. You have a natural thought or a response to what's going on. But instead of saying it, you think, oh, is that right? Should I say that? Will anyone think it's a silly comment? Will anyone think that I don't know what I'm talking about? And then by that time, the whole meeting has gone on, right? And you can't very well say this, 5 minutes after the point that it was triggered, right? So, what we need to try and do is start practicing sharing your point of view. If you want to start sharing your point of view with someone more comfortable first, fair enough, right? But then show yourself that, let's say with that safer person, you just make your comment on the spot, whatever reaction you had. Maybe you don't know why yet, but you go ahead and say it. And they go, oh, well, why did you think that? And then you start to think with, I think I thought that because, and you give your reasoning slowly, right? Reason by reason, bit by bit. The more you practice that with a safe person, then the more trust you have in yourself that even though I don't know my full response yet, my initial response can be trusted. I can say that initial response and then buy myself some time to slowly give the other reasons to why I thought that way. By the way, in a work setting, a good way to buy yourself time is to say things like fillers. I call them fillers. Things like you give your opinion and then you're like, you need to buy a bit more time to give your reasoning. So you can say stuff like, what do you think? Can you see where I'm coming from with that idea? Right? Maybe someone chimes in and goes, yeah, actually, that's true. Like, da, 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 da. Maybe they say, not really. I don't really see it. Right? And then you can say, okay, well, now let me share a little bit more about why I made that comment, right? Then just give a little more, give a little more. Okay, so practice trying to give your opinions on the spot and back it up slowly by buying yourself a little bit of time with little comments like, can you see where I'm coming from? Does anyone else feel the same way? Right? Um, so these are the different little tips that I have for you to build self-esteem, right? I want to turn the time over back to Prath for a little bit, and we're going to see whether you have some questions for us now. Okay, so I'll turn the time back over to Prath for a bit, and let's see where everybody is with our understanding of building self-esteem today.
Thank you so much, Alex. That was a wonderful presentation. I learned a lot and it was very insightful. And I'm sure a lot of us are burning with some questions in our mind. So let's get started with the Q&A segment. Just a couple of reminders. Feel free to drop in your questions in the chat. I will be reading them out loud for everyone's benefit. And again, if you would prefer to stay anonymous, you can send in your questions directly to me or my colleague Manasa through the Zoom chat as well. If you prefer, feel free to unmute yourself and directly ask a question to Alex. We recommend doing that as well. You can pick Alex's mind a little bit more, dig into the question deeper.
If you've had certain particular struggles at work, um, whether uh, any of those struggles wouldn't be worked well with some of the tips and ideas that we came up with here today, right? If you still feel like none of those quite work for my situation, please feel free to ask. And also if you feel like, oh yeah, this is something I could do to help my self-esteem at the workplace, to build my confidence at the workplace. I'd love for you to share with the rest of us how you think, it might help. So yeah, we're ready and waiting to see.
We have one anonymous question. So we'll start off with the first one. So this person tends to feel discouraged and they lose their confidence when they make mistakes. So they're like scared of making mistakes. This is how the question goes. I know it's part of the learning process and that it's okay, but can't help feeling this way that, that they're scared of making mistakes. Then after, I often find it difficult to bounce back. How can I develop a mindset to handle this better?
Yeah, thank you for that question. You know, I think to some degree, a lot of us are afraid of making mistakes, you know. Those of us who aren't are the ones who've made a lot. You know, we've just started making mistakes and realizing that when I make them, it's so natural. Humans aren't made like robots, like we just have an answer and a solution for everything. We learn by trying and experimenting, and experience teaches us what to do differently the next time. So, usually, when you're afraid of making mistakes, it's probably because one, you're not as used to making them, right? Or two, when you make them, you don't have the best way of thinking about having made them. So when you make a mistake, right? What I want you to encourage yourself with is I'm really proud of you that you tried and you did enough to actually make a mistake because it means that you're experiencing, it means that you're moving forward enough to have done something that you realize um, isn't the way that you wanted it to go, right? So what is it that you want to go differently the next time? Congratulate yourself for figuring out what you would do differently next time, and that that wasn't what you wanted or expected or hoped would have happened. So what is it that you can then figure out as a way to move towards what you do want the next time? And remind yourself that if I hadn't made this mistake, I wouldn't have figured that out or known it as strongly and as tangibly as I now know it, right? So I'm now that better version of myself because I now know it. And I can make a better, more informed decision on how I do it the next time. Okay. Hope that was helpful.
I think here we explored about what to do to cope with this situation better. We have a follow-up from the same person, and I think this is more about how do we manage emotions around those
Mhm.
areas. So this is how the context goes. I've been receiving more tasks outside my comfort zone to help me grow and advance in my career. I actually appreciate it as it challenges me, but at the same time, this person feels anxious even before starting the task. So they're wondering how to better manage these emotions. So on
Yeah.
one side, we have like practical things that we can actually do, but how do we deal with emotions simultaneously?
Yeah. So firstly, I want to say it's super, super natural for you to feel a little bit high alert when something that is new or harder or more unknown than what you've known before gets thrown on your plate, right? Um, that feeling of feeling like, oh no, anxiety, right? Anxiety and worry come when something is uncertain or unsure, right? So, first thing we need to do is validate that emotion. That makes so much sense that you're feeling worried and anxious because it's something you're not sure yet about. You've never done this before. So it's a good thing that your body is trying to help you understand how you feel about the situation, which is worried and anxious. Am I going to be able to do this right? So the first thing is to validate that emotion, right? It's so normal that that's how you feel. You feel this way because it's something that's scary that you don't know how it will go yet, right? After you validated and comforted yourself about how you feel, the next step is what is it that I'm going to do about it, right? So if the anxiety and the worry is just enough to make you alert and focused on the task, that's a good amount of anxiety and worry. But if the anxiety is so much that now I can't think because it's too scary, then what we need to do is allow the emotion to drop a little. And how do we do that is by encouraging ourselves that I'm just going to take one little step at a time. I'm not going to look at the whole thing all at once because that's a bit much. I'm just going to think of one tiny little thing that I could do that helps me in the direction, right? It could be uh, just trying to make sense of what needs to be done, right? It could be just asking somebody else what they know and the information about this project so far, right? It could be just starting to list down anything and everything you can think of that needs to be done in the project, and then we'll decide which one of these we do next, right? But just a tiny little, the smallest thing you can possibly think of that puts you somewhere in that direction of what needs to be done for the project. Okay. The other thing I think you can do is remind yourself of past projects that you've done where when you first started, you felt the same way. Oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? This feels insurmountable. And then where you are now with that kind of project, I'm good. I'm easy. I know how to do that kind of project now. And when you can see how you've gone from that anxious, worried state to this, I got this, I know how to do it state, then you can encourage yourself that you're going to be able to do that again. You're just not there yet. Okay.
Silence.
Yeah.
For the next question, we have one from Yilman. It goes like this. How about speaking? How do I differentiate between speaking versus being disruptive at work? Because that can be something I struggle with when I have thoughts in mind during work discussions.
Yeah. So you worry that I'm disrupting the flow of the conversation. One way that I like to deal with that is to say, I'd love to share something about what was just said, but maybe this is better shared at a later point. Can I share what it is and you let me know whether now's a good time to talk through it or whether it would be better talked about at a later time, right? Because that gives the leader of the discussion time to decide for themselves. It could be a perfect time to talk about it, or it could be better. Maybe he's going to actually, or he or she is going to actually talk about it later, right? So that's a nice way, I think. Does that help with the question? Maybe, okay.
Okay, we have an okay from Yilman. We have another question that's along the same lines that has to do with communicating at work. The question goes like this. What if whenever you speak up a valid comment or opinion at work and the people are stopping or going against your opinion, even though it's valid, and often not heard despite trying? So this person often tries to communicate their opinions, but they don't feel heard even after trying. How can I manage, resolve, and cope in such a situation despite much effort to try speaking up confidently?
Okay, this is a little bit more of a complex question because we need to assess and understand what's actually going on here, right? Is this a case of people having some sort of, they're coming from things at a very different perspective than yours, right? So they all have maybe a similar background or a similar way of seeing things, and your way is not similar and that dissimilar, and that's why they constantly do not validate what you're saying? Or is this something that is more on a relationship level? So it's like contextually, they might agree or disagree with what you're saying, but because of the relationships between the other people and yourself, um, they're not wanting to give you that validation, right? Um, so this particular question, I think it requires a little bit more understanding about the full context of the situation to decide what we would do here?
Thank you. Feel free to unmute yourself if you would like to explore a bit more, or we can move on to the next one. So we have a question from Neeta. Even though I know I'm competent and have earned awards at work, my seniors often compare my competence with colleagues and have been quite condescending about it. How should I handle these situations? I find it challenging speaking up for myself and really want to change this pattern.
Sorry, could you read from the middle of the question again?
So, my seniors often compare my competence with colleagues and have been quite condescending about it. How should I handle these situations?
Hmm.
Even though they've won like several awards at work and they
Hmm.
know that they're competent.
Hmm. Hmm. I feel like this might be one of those situations where you want to have a one-on-one conversation with the people who are making those sorts of comments, right? So it could be something like, hey, I noticed that in front of others, sometimes you talk about the differences between myself and others. Is that a concern of yours? Do you feel as though there are some of my competencies falling short here? Could we talk about the details of the basis of some of those comments that were made? Right, so really hold them to their comments. I think you can see I'm still speaking in a really professional manner, but I'm having them take responsibility for some of the things that they're actually saying, right? So I noticed you mentioned this about so and so versus mine. Is there something that you feel I didn't do quite right there that you think I can work on? Right? If they can't give you anything, then it probably kind of speaks back to them, well, I shouldn't be saying those comments if I can't back it up, right? Or maybe what I'm saying isn't fair because I can't back it up, right? If they can back it up, then great, then you get something from it and you learn why they're making those type of comments anyway, right? Hopefully
Thanks,
that.
Alex. I have another question for you that's again like along the same lines and has to do with communicating with a senior at work. Here's how the question goes. How to share an alternative suggestion with a colleague who is older and has a higher position, but is not open to alternative suggestions and is headstrong.
Yeah, my heart goes out to you, that person who's struggling with that. Um, it is really difficult especially when it's your senior or so someone you report to. Um, what you can try and do is to know what it is that you want them to take on board and don't go at it directly, right? You talk to them in such a way that the idea comes from them instead of coming from you, right? It's really unfortunate if you have to do things that way, but I do understand that in some situations you're forced to work with somebody like that. So people like that who are very strongly opinionated, they see your challenge or your idea as a put down to who they are, right? So any challenge feels as though you are um, threatening who they are as a person. So essentially you want to get points across to them without them feeling threatened about it at all. And usually the way you would do that is by having them come to conclusions that came from you, but they think came from themselves. Hopefully that's helpful.
Thanks, Alex. We have 5 minutes to go. Do you mind extending it to around 5, 10 minutes more because we have around 3, 4 questions yet to
Yeah.
address.
Sure, I can stay a little. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So this question is from Alia. I think I'm having a hard time accepting good words about my work. I somehow doubt myself a lot. despite more people will say I'm doing great. The compliments make me feel small even though they are good. They don't really feel good because I feel bad and I don't feel the same way. What is the best situation to handle this? I think it's, if I'm not wrong, it aligns with what you were talking about, belief,
Mm,
self-belief and all that.
yeah, yeah. I think what we would want to try and do there is to investigate why you don't believe the comments that they're making. It could be that they're making comments that are kind of global, like, but you're great at what you do, and things like that, right? Where you could use the same strategy we talked about earlier to actually ask them, hey, that's really nice that you shared that. Could I know if there's anything specific that made you say that? Right. And then they can help by furnishing some details, right? Maybe like, well, you're always able to, I don't know, talk to this client well or whatever. Maybe they give you more details about why they made that comment in the first place. The other thing you can do is investigate what are the things that make me disbelieve what they're saying, right? Again, it could be because it's too general, but it could be for other reasons. The other thing you can think about doing is when they ask you, when they say certain things about what you've done, if it's more specific, ask yourself, what is the evidence to show that that's correct? And what is the evidence that shows against it, right? Then the evidence that's against it, how realistic are those things, right? So just check with yourself, like almost giving it a fact check, because you don't want to go just off feeling. You want to go off of as real of data that you possibly can. Okay, hope that helps.
Thanks, Alex. We have another anonymous question. This has more to do with identifying when it's the right time to stay or leave from the current workplace. This is how the question goes. I've been at my company for almost 3 years and feeling very drained. The workplace is filled with people who are not very competent, but also some who are great. The bosses often ignore quieter employees while pacifying the older ones. And they also say things like, use your eyes, and like very mean, condescending things to employees. I find, I feel like this environment is fading me out and tiring me. How do you know if it's time to leave a workplace or if it's worth sticking around?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I have many, many clients that come to me in this position. How much is enough, right? How much is too much? And that is a pretty difficult thing to assess, and it is quite specific to each and every person, right? But the short answer of it is you've got to know when the benefits are no longer outweighing the cons, right? Um, you can stay in something if it gives you other things, and if those other things are worthy of the sacrifice, right? But when the sacrifice becomes more than what the benefit of staying is, that's probably the point at which it's better to choose to go, right? Um, it's quite tough to define that, but that is a process where you need to really, really try and write down what are the things that keep me here. Maybe I have really good relationships with my same level peers, right? Or I'm actually still learning so much despite their way of teaching or the mode at which they teach it, right? Or I have certain benefits by staying with this company that make it worth it, right? But and then you have to do the other side. But then these are all the things that really harm me and hurt me, right? And you have to decide whether that trade-off is worthy of your time or not. I'd love to give you more detail on it, but it also requires me to ask you a lot of questions about the actual situation. So I think with the amount of information I have, that's what I can share. Yeah.
Thanks, Alex. We have another question that goes like this. Most high-level managers can sound very direct and confrontational when communicating, which really affects their direct reports' self-esteem. Any suggestion how they can soften their way of talking, even if they're not used to it?
Soften the
Yeah,
people.
the manager's tone.
Mm,
But I would guess it's more like uh, if it's trying to soften the manager's tone, then we'd have to do something to convey it to them.
yeah. Exactly. So it's either you learn how to cope with it and shield yourself from it, right? Meaning you go in knowing that it's there and you essentially put on your fire gear. I know the fire is going to come, but I've got my gear on so it doesn't touch me, right? I know they're going to say this. I'm just going to take that kernel of truth. So they're going to say all these awful things about me, but then there's that kernel of truth, which is actually the context, like the information that I need. I just grab that and leave the rest, right? Or you say something, right? So that could sound like, some of the way that you phrase things to me feels like it need not be phrased that manner. Is it possible for us to talk about it as what you'd like to see from me versus the things that you're really not too happy with? If we phrase it this way, I think it will help us maintain a better relationship with each other, for example. Does that
So
sound?
we have three more questions. I think it's the perfect to wrap it up. The first question goes like this. I naturally struggle with low confidence, which makes it difficult for me to evaluate myself objectively without relying on external confirmation. What are some tools I could use to assess my competencies more objectively and independent?
So if we're talking about in a work context, right, what you want to look at are firstly your technical and your hard skills. So that would include I have training in this. I know I have done this particular testing and passed it, right? I have this kind of grading for this thing. I have this achievement course that I went for, right? That's more of the hard skills. And then you also want to look at the soft skills, right? So the soft skills would be things like um, I know how to behave in these certain situations, right? I'm able to communicate a point of view well, if it's in this sort of context, right? You want to give things as much detail as you possibly can. So if you think that's enough detail, go one more level and then one more level. So if I say I'm a good communicator, not enough. I communicate well when I have the information that is needed, right? I communicate well when I have the information that's needed if I am speaking to people that I'm comfortable with, for example, right? You want that level of detail because then it's the most accurate it could possibly be, okay? And then if there's lots of those versions of that detail, that's fine, right? You will end up having more pointers when you go to that level of detail, right? So there's the hard skills and there's the soft skills. There's also the like very personal strengths and skills the strengths that you have. So personality strengths, like this is the sort of person that I am. A lot of times if we do have so lower self-esteem, you might need to start from what others say and then go to what you think is true. So for example, my parents or my dad seems to think that uh, I'm really good at observation, for example. And you're like, well, I agree with him on this front, but I don't agree with him on that front. So write down the one you do agree with and why. Again, make it as specific as you possibly can. Okay? Hope that's enough detail for you.
Thanks, Alex. Um, Just a small note that we hope you'll stay tuned until the end. We have just a couple of QR codes coming up and two final questions. Um, Here's how the first one goes. How can I constructively deal with a supervisor who often gaslights me and misinterprets my attempts to speak up as challenging her, even though raising this with this person's boss hasn't helped? So they're looking for constructive ways to handle the situation. So there's a bit of gaslighting involved from the superior, and they'd like to navigate it better.
Hmm. Firstly, try and be very clear with yourself about situations before you go into conversations with that person, right? So assess it for yourself where you are on a particular matter or project. Check that with somebody else that you trust, right? So that it's not just you telling yourself whatever you want to tell yourself. And then go into it prepared for the gaslighting that might happen. She might say this, she might say that. So when she does say it, you're like, yep, okay, I predicted that. That's aligned to what I thought she might say, right? But I know that factually this is actually still true, despite what's being said, right? So prepare ahead of time and be clear with yourself so that when it happens, you're prepared. What was the last part of the question after the gaslighting part? Sorry.
It was about how they can constructively handle this on their own. They're trying to learning to stand their ground and
Mm,
want to speak up, but because of the
yeah. Okay.
gaslighting, they're
Yeah.
unable to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Speaking up about how you feel may not necessarily work that well with this person. So we either use that, get them to think of it or say it themselves, like we talked about earlier with the other question, or um, we can try to get them to we can try and pacify them first by going with whatever they're saying. Okay, sure, let them say whatever they want to say, and then go at it in another uh, go at your point in a non-aggressive way. So would it be possible if we thought about doing this, right? And then tie it to something they've said, right? You also mentioned that you felt that da, da, da. So would this also align with what you felt, right? So you kind of trying to put this same team vibe out there that I'm not against you, I'm with you, I'm agreeing with what you are saying so that you can eventually get them to come to the point where you want to get to. Hopefully that's helpful.
You. Um, we have the final question. It's along the same lines about speaking up, but it's quite different in the sense that, so this is from Cheryl, and when they speak up, their mind tends to go blank and they forget what they want to say, maybe because of anxiety or nervousness. They also provide more context, saying that they write down main points to cover, but it also depends on the conversation, and sometimes they just can't think of how to respond in the moment, and they end up saying, okay. So, what would your response
Mhm.
advice
Yep.
be?
So don't worry, this is super common. A lot of us face this at different points. And um, what I would suggest is that you are soft with yourself about it when it happens, right? You want to be saying to yourself, it's okay that it happens. It happens to people at all sorts of different moments, right? The only thing we can keep doing is keep practicing speaking up, right? So if there's a time where you speak up, and then you don't know the next response, right? You don't know what to say next. You feel stuck or you can't think. Just you can say things like, okay, let me consider what you've shared, right? Okay, let me give it some thought. And then maybe we can return to this conversation at a later point, right? I think I would like to do a little bit more reading or give that a little bit more thought so I can give you a better answer here, right? Um, that those types of phrases help for the other person to still continue viewing you as somebody who is thoughtful and somebody who is just taking a pause, right? Instead of trying to react or forcing a reaction, which then sometimes comes across either careless or like you're making stuff up that you don't really know the answer to. Okay, so that's hopefully helpful for you to do that. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Alex. Thank you for answering all the questions, and thanks everyone for your uh, participation. We hope that today's session was helpful. Just a couple of other slides where, yeah, there we go. Thanks, Alex. If you can scan the QR code on screen or click the link in the chat, you'll be led to a feedback form. It will take less than a minute of your time. So we really hope you let us know what you thought of the session, how we can improve the future ones. We'd love to hear from you.
You're very welcome, those of you who are giving your thanks on the chat. I'm very, very glad to have spent this time with you, and I hope that it was helpful.
I think we can go to the next slide.
Okay.
So before we wrap up, we'd love to invite you to the next upcoming AMA, which is happening on 7th November, same time as today. We'll be talking about identifying and dealing with relationship red flags. And as usual, you can scan the QR code on the screen or click the link in the chat to register for your free tickets. As usual, the webinar is free, and yeah, this one's for everyone who wants to build and maintain healthy relationships.
I did want to share that with a lot of the questions that were asked earlier, for us therapists, I can't speak for everyone, but for myself, I really like to get as much detail and nuance, emotion and behavior and the context for the situation before sharing ways that you could approach the situation, right? So today, because I'm just going off of the little information you're sharing, it's a bit hard for me to get a solution or strategy for you that would probably feel perfect for your situation. So just know that in a therapy session, your therapist would be working really hard to understand the details and the nuances of your story before they give solutions or suggestions on what to do. And then they'd be asking about, does this make sense? Would this make sense? What wouldn't make sense, so that it's really tailored to your specific situation. So if you felt like today's answers didn't quite fit, just know that if you do come for therapy, you would hopefully get answers and solutions that feel a little bit more applicable. Okay?